Every gardener knows that after the digging, after the planting, after the long season of tending and growth, the harvest comes. Hello, I'm Mary, and I'm all about connection. I'm all about holding hands in a circle, dancing with friends, long, meandering conversations, email, Facebook, Zoom, I'll take it all. I'm all about connection with the earth, connection with dirt, not just the concept of earth. I like to get my hands dirty. I'm all about connection with ideas. I love ideas that spark my mind to go where my mind has never gone before. I'm all about connection across generations and cultures. Diversity is big for me. I want to engage with diversity, up close and personal, not just admire it from a safe distance. I'm all about connection with my very own self, and that takes time and space and silence. This is the credo I wrote after being inspired by Mary Beam, who you heard earlier, who was inspired by our Unitarian youth. Our Genders and Sexualities Alliance, we like to say GSA, recently had a Netflix party to watch Hannah Gadsby's latest show, Douglas. If you haven't seen it, well, for starters, you should. She spends the first 15 minutes of the hour-long show explaining what she's going to talk about. As she says, that way your expectations will be met because she's just told you what to expect. While watching, I wondered if I could pull a Gadsby and do a similar thing today. Then this week, when I reread the website description of this service to make sure that what I was writing was in fact on track, I realized that I had already done that. But lest I am the only one who reread the website description this week, I'll highlight some points for you. I said that I would share some personal stories about the passion I have for making connections, and I will. There have been many times where I have felt great pleasure from the simple act of introducing people to each other. I said I'd share some gratitude I've received from others for doing just that. Basically, I'm going to brag a little publicly about people who have thanked me for saying hello and being open to whatever happens next. That may be an introduction to somebody else or a suggestion of a volunteer job. It said that I would share something about the theology of creative interchange. And what would a Unitarian sermon be without some kind of academic or theological underpinning? For those who like their sermons on the intellectual side, please hang in there. It's not a lot, but I'll offer you a little something. And the kicker, the description said, Mary will likely try to persuade you to connect and engage more broadly and more deeply. So that's where I'm going to make a plug for you to volunteer more. There, I said it. But I'll be brief. I tell people I'm good at asking and good at hearing no. That part is as close as I get to the lecture Hannah Gadsby warns her audience about. It's not much of a lecture, really. Just relax. No need to worry. If I'm in a room full of Unitarians, I can't not look around to see who I think needs to be introduced to whom. Some of you have participated in this game with me. Eva Ellen says that when she first started attending UCV, she concluded, so Mary is UCV's matchmaker. Sometimes I think it's that there's a volunteer job the person might enjoy and be good at. Another friend years ago phrased it as, you want to be God's human resource director. I just get excited about putting people together and with other people or even jobs. Can't be explained, perhaps. During the time I worked as executive director for the Canadian Unitarian Council, we often lined up multiple weekend meetings at the same location and time, largely to save on travel expenses and staff time. Once, when the National Youth Advisory Committee was meeting over the weekend in one room at Toronto First, and a task force, sorry, I forget which one, was in another room, I was flitting between the two groups to check on how things were going. Late Friday night, I thought, why should I be the only one having this much fun? So I arranged for Saturday lunch to be everyone together and mixing up the youth and the older adults at different tables. Seeing my pleasure when I scanned the room, thinking to myself about the fact that these brilliant, committed Unitarians might not be talking with each other but for my intervention, Diane Bosman, the director of RE at Toronto First at the time, shook her head and said, "You're like a mad scientist who goes, I wonder if I put this together with this, what would happen? But you do it with people." I admit there were some strange concoctions that came out of some of those experiments. No explosions, and to be honest, some combinations seemed to be fairly inert. But it made the meetings more interesting, for me at least. I do sometimes wonder how annoying I must be, but then I'll get a dose of gratitude and that keeps me carrying on. Tomiko Suzuki, now one of our most active Environment Committee members, credits me with getting her involved. I noticed her lurking at the edges of Hewitt Hall during coffee hour and struck up a conversation advising her to find a small group to be involved with, that otherwise it's very difficult in a large group like ours to feel connected with other people. Listening to her interests, it was clear that the Environment Committee would be the place that she would want to be and fit in with other people. And that was even before I knew for sure that her dad was indeed that Suzuki. When I asked her permission by email to name her in this sermon, she said yes, and that I could also mention that it was me who told her about the fact that newer, younger people often sit in the back rows of the sanctuary and are willing to chat one-on-one after the service, but they often don't make their way over to join the hubbub in Hewitt Hall. Yep, that's what gives my life meaning. I think of myself as a catalyst rather than a mad scientist, but I don't mind what it's called. Because Vancouver Pride is coming and I'm chair of your GSA, one testimonial I'm very proud of is from Reverend Fred Cappuccino. Fred basically credits me with single-handedly changing the course of Canadian history on same-sex marriage. He's a very sweet and generous man. And I do think that he and I, together with the National CUC Genders and Sexualities Diversity Monitoring Group, played our part. July 20th this year celebrated the 15th anniversary of the change in law in Canada. As part of the lead-up to that parliamentary vote, the CUC presented a brief to the Standing Committee on Human Rights and Justice. We were the only religious organization that could proudly proclaim that all, 100% of our ministers, were ready, willing, and able to perform same-sex marriages. For those kinds of briefs, you get to have two people present, and I quickly decided that Fred would be my partner in this endeavor. For starters, I wanted a minister who would indeed perform same-sex marriages. Fred had been married for 50 years at that time, and had been a Unitarian minister for that length of time as well. As he lived near Ottawa, it was even geographically convenient. Fred and his wife Bonnie had 2 children of their own, and then went on to adopt 19 others from around the world. Just try to tell me that this man does not have good family values. Fred's commendation to me comes more about from the administrative part of making sure that our brief got in on time, translated to French. I followed up with anyone who hadn't signed the petition, etc., etc. A lot of bureaucratic stuff. But what fueled me to do that work was the connection with the people. How could we not do our best for an issue that Unitarians have stood for such a long time? And indeed, when the committee voted whether to move forward to the next step to legalizing same-sex marriage, initially it was an even vote, a cliffhanger. The chair cast the deciding vote in favor, and Fred tells me it was because the chair liked what I had to say. I think if it was CUC's influence, at least in part, it was that Fred had set out to make them smile during the presentation as his main goal. So here's the theological underpinnings. Imagine my delight when I discovered that this penchant and pleasure I get from connection was the life's work of a leading American religious philosopher. Henry Nelson Wyman's parents were both Presbyterian Theological School grads. He had long, free-ranging talks with his mother, but he says, "I was never taught religion, but I caught something from my parents by contagion. In time, it formulated itself into religion." People have credited those talks with being the trigger for him developing his theory, eventually called creative interchange. His explanation for God was that between him and his mother as they had those conversations. In his PhD dissertation in 1917, he proposed that the greatest good for all people could be achieved if the many individual interests could be creatively organized so as to function as a single interest. This creative interest is not to fulfill any end or desire that we already possess, but to expand our consciousness and understanding. Two of his books in 1929 and 1930 investigated the solitary experience of religion. In my credo words, connection with my very own self. During his career, Wyman's thought passed through several phases. He first studied the meaning of religion for the individual. Then his emphasis shifted to a community or cultural outlook. Finally, he articulated his belief in the value of creative interchange between individuals and groups. The question he always pursued was, what operates in human life with such character and power that it will transform someone as they cannot transform themselves, saving them from evil and leading them to the best that human life can ever reach? I changed his pronouns in honor of pride. Although a little tangential quotation by Wyman himself about God and pronouns. He said, "Regrettably, we have no pronoun fit for deity. We never shall have, so long as the male of the species complacently assumes that God must be masculine, and the female abets his blasphemous arrogance." Wyman identifies 5 aspects of those events in which qualitative meaning grows. The first is an expansion of the range of the individual's capacity to know, control, and appreciate. The next is increase in the appreciative understanding of oneself and others as individuals. The third aspect is a progressive integration of all that person is acquiring. And the fourth is increase in the capacity to meet suffering, failure, and death creatively. And the fifth is the increase of freedom. The total event he calls creative interchange, and by this he means any situation in which individuals encounter other persons or possibilities with openness and sensitivity. The one great enemy of the creative event is rigidity, commitment to individual limited values, closedness to new experiences and possibilities. As Wyman sees the relation of the creative process and the goods that it produces, he does not think of means and ends. The process is the ongoing reality in which stable structures emerge, but these structures are not intrinsically better than the process. I love this quotation that the created good is intrinsically less good than the creative good. In 1931, Wyman moved from the Presbyterian to the Congregational Church. Slippery slope. And indeed, in 1949, after much upheaval in his personal and professional life, he became a Unitarian minister. He continued to teach, study, and write rather than work as a parish minister, which he early on decided that he was not suited for. In a 1967 sermon, he said, "I don't think I've found any other association of people who gather regularly to consider the important problems of human existence, which I found is more congenial, or at least as congenial as this. There you have it. He found us congenial. 6 days after his death in 1975, Wyman was awarded the Unitarian Universalist Association's Award for Distinguished Service to the cause of liberal religion. Wyman's definition serves to identify good with concrete actuality. An event is good to the degree that it has complexity, unity, and intensity. This means that the greatest good is promoted not when we project ideal situations and seek the means to achieve them, but when we discover the process which produces good and increases the conditions that facilitate its action. This may be a good message for us as we embark on a transitional phase of the life in our congregation. So, what does this have to do with you? Lecture coming. Well, UCV offers a lot of potential, joy of connection. Opportunities for creative interchange abound. There is the possibility of transformation here among these people. And I do want to encourage you to volunteer more and to engage with new people, potential Unitarians. We've all heard the old adages of you get back what you put into it and what goes around comes around, etc., etc. And if you're already volunteering a lot but feeling you're not getting anything back, I dare say you might want to rethink whether or not whether, but how you are involved here. Where is the place where your greatest gift meets UCV's greatest need? The bio in this description announced that I am myself shifting my volunteer roles to support intergenerational connections and programs. As an aside, I've started telling people that, as well as stepping down from organizing circle dances and earth spirit events, I've also stepped down from the role of she who knows everybody and everything. I want to give a shout out here to our environment team. You may know them as this group who raise money, attend protest rallies, offer educational forums, but I know them also as a group who quickly started doing weekly wine and cheese sessions on Zoom every Friday night for months now. While changing the world, they take the time to enjoy each other's congenial selves. So I urge you to lurk around the fringes of UCV, whether when the time comes in the back rows of the sanctuary, or for now in Zoom breakout rooms, or even through email lists, and send out a hello to especially the newer and younger people who might be brave enough to join us, and then just see what happens next, not with an attempt to control the outcome, but to give space for creative interchange. So that's it for me. Till we meet again. Over to you, Patrick.